Now, preview time.
Time, that all-important benchmark, one of the most paramount measurements known to mankind, affecting everyone all around the world. An invisible force so powerful, but unseen, silent, and dominant. It governs how we run our miserable little existences, at its mercy, respecting it unknowingly, as we live our lives to the rhythm of tick, tock, tick, tock. This man knows all about it.
Have you ever had the feeling that you've been here before, and yet everyone tells you that you can't have been? Or perhaps you've felt that this has all happened to me before, just like it's happening now, and I know what's going to happen next. Well, a lot of people do get those sensations, and nobody can yet explain them. They seem somehow to involve the mind travelling forwards or backwards in time. It's fiction, of course, but it's very close to a new theory which scientists are now working on to explain the universe and time. Today's science fiction so often becomes tomorrow's science fact.
So imagine, if you will, a time barrier. If a time barrier existed and you went through it, where would you end up? What would happen to you? What sort of adventures would unfold in this other dimension, this other realm? Join me and look again as we go back to 1970, to ATV's fantastic little program about time travel and adventures, as we join two adolescents that push through the barricade and end up in the past and the future. This is for my viewer, Liz79. I hope you enjoy it. Get prepared for... Timeslip was broadcast on Mondays from September 1970 to March 1971. Timeslip was another golden nugget of Kidult entertainment, brought to you from ATV, from the Midlands region in the United Kingdom. ATV, like HTV West, brought us some amazing other treats like this, and this.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Manrio.
You know, I never can find the thing which it... Oh. There we are. That's why I always leave it.
Thank you.
Timeslip concerns two teenagers, Simon, a 15-year-old head-on young-shoulder geeky type, and Liz, a naive but resilient in a 1970s female stereotypical way counterpart, who is just integral to the plot, but being a 1970 girl, needs rescuing from a male from various scrapes, and whines just a little bit. Anyway, Simon is holidaying with Liz and her parents, as he has just lost his mother, and her parents, Jean and Frank, decide to go to a guest house in St. Oswald. Prior to this, a rather dumb girl called Sarah goes missing at an abandoned naval station. Curious to find out why, Simon and Liz go to the area, but unexpectedly find a rift in time itself, and are whisked back to 1940. In the opening story, The Wrong End of Time, Liz meets her father when he was a young naval officer who was stationed there at the time, and both Liz and Simon discover why he lost his mind, as well as trying to resolve the disappearance of the young girl and thwarting evil Nazis to boot. Overseeing all of this is the mysterious trainer who was the commanding officer in 1940 and turns up in 1970, making Liz's father relive the enigma of events that led to his mind being wiped and his breakdown 30 years ago. Both Liz and Simon don't lose contact with their folks due to a handy telepathic link across time provided by Liz's mother, so she can see events involving both the kids once they go through the time force field. The Wrong End of Time, the first story, is a super little opening tale which sets the scene for this great little series over its 6-part tenure. It was penned by Bruce Stewart, and we get to see some smashing performances by all the cast involved. Spencer Banks plays Simon and is just excellent. He delivers his lines with gusto, and one of his endearing features is the old man wisecracks from a boy's mouth, with some delicious sarcasm and wise owl logical conclusions. Mr. Banks is perfectly casted, and so is Cheryl Burfield as Liz. Very girly to start with, but there is a grudging fondness for Simon which develops into an almost girlfriend-boyfriend relationship by the last story. One of the things that you can see this in is if you check out is when Simon has to choose between Liz or Vera in the year of the burn-up, in that story for example, which is slightly far removed from this very first opening tale, and the second one, to be honest with you. Timeslip seems to be also a coming-of-age tale wrapped in a heavy overcoat of science fiction. The technological abuse, as well as advancement, is well explored during the series, and like with most TV of this golden age, is a warning to the future, and some of it is most prescient now. Through the time barrier once more, and Liz and Simon end up in 1990, and they end up at the time of the icebox for one of the best remembered segments of the 4 stories. Against the wishes of Liz's parents, but by the persuasion from Commander Trainer, Simon goes through the barrier once more, followed by Liz. In this, the tale that arguably left the most impression on the viewer, we have Liz meeting her older, colder self called Beth, and her mother in a funky wig. Simon basically finds out that the head of the base, called Devereaux, played by the stoic John Barron, he of Doomwatch, and some of you might remember him playing the role of CJ in the comedy The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, is in fact a clone, and that murder is afoot in a memorable sequence where Professor Jolly Hockey Sticks Joynton ages to 100 as a longevity drug has been tampered with. Again, the relationship between Simon and Liz flourishes. There's a hilarious bit where Simon accuses Liz of being a hussy, and the funny thing here is that Liz is the most unlikely candidate for this accusation, and what Simon says to her is brilliantly scripted and reinforces Simon's old-fashioned views with just a little hint of jealousy.
You're a funny kid, but nice. Why isn't Beth like you?
I don't like Beth.
Tell you what, you teach Beth how to be nice to me, and I'll let you out of jail, okay?
Okay. You mean it, Larry?
Ah, you could persuade her if you put your mind to it. Twist her round your little finger the way you have me. Man was born to trouble as the sparks fly upwards. Still, since I'm used to it. Hey, the boss man is right. It is warm tonight. See ya.
Simon, he's going to do it for us, he is!
You didn't have to flirt with him, though, did you?
Flirt?
It's nothing to do with me, Liz, but if you're going to behave like that with every man you meet, you'll turn out to be the sort of girl it's not very nice to know.
Classic. In Time of the Icebox, the historical setting as The Wrong End of Time, the first story, is replaced by pure futuristic science fiction. The tale is predominantly studio bound, with the location footage in the field where the time barrier is located, assisting with the continuity. Now we are treated to some proper full-on early 1970 sets, combining the psychedelically hungover in their concept, design and execution. The retro appeal is a treasure, with the spinning reels of computer tapes and the teletype printers, which is just pure nostalgia. A 1970 production of how 20 years later is going to be. The silver reflective corridors, though, must have been an absolute nightmare concerning the reflection of the production crew. Here Timeslip was ahead of its day. Cloning was a relatively new concept in 1970, although 20 years in the future is rather generous in terms of how we would advance. The idea of plugging your organic brain into the computer certainly nods towards the VR technology, still in its infancy, with Professor Joynton experiencing New Zealand and Liz and Simon tripping to the moon, courtesy of stock footage mix and animation effects, crude but very effective. The makeup in this story is also half decent, but the most controversial was the aging to death of Professor Joynton, which was censored when the series was transmitted again in 1973. Icebox also joined the opening tale, The Wrong End of Time, in a novelisation of the Timeslip series, which was published in 1970 to coincide with the series. From Icebox to Flame in the third story of the Timeslip series, as Simon and Liz escape from freezing to death and becoming experimental fodder as they leave this time period for another. In the story In the Year of the Burn-Up, Commander Traynor summons Simon back to Whitehall, but forbids Simon to go through the barrier. With his thirst for knowledge ignited by Traynor forbidding this act, Simon defiantly goes back through the barrier once more to another alternate 1990 on a quest to seek out the reason why Traynor forbids him and to find out more truths. Now, in this series, we actually see the bond between Simon and Liz finally developed, as Liz, bless her, goes to the barrier learning Simon is going ahead and faithfully follows her friend, although Simon is very stiff upper-lipped about the situation over this mere girl following him. This future has a much warmer Beth, who is now a bit of a renegade hippie, the antithesis of her bureaucratic elitist character from the time of the Icebox. Simon is also in for a shock in this story as he meets his alternate self in the form of 2957. You see, in the future there are no such things as names, just numbers, similar to now where we are a mere pay number on the payroll.
I am not a number, I am a free man!
To the corporations we work for. The bigger the company, the more faceless. Whether this is a point that's being made in the script, I don't know, but I love this notion, as I've always thought this about large corporations, especially with the way that HR treats you. Anyway, here humans have manipulated nature and altered the geographical terrain as some sort of master plan, idealistically trying to alter the landscape for the benefit of mankind. But due to this, it's going against nature and it's caused its ultimate destruction. Wasn't intended to be that, but Simon finds out that Commander Traynor has sabotaged the computer, and therefore the governmental master plan has resulted in a cock-up, which initially was the for the benefit of good. Alas, Traynor has gone in there and put in dubious sort of programming on the computer in order to destroy the world. And you see, in true megalomaniac form, what Traynor attempts to do is to destroy the Earth in order that he can build it anew.
No! Nothing in the world can stop me now!
Played in true megalomaniac fashion. Simon and Liz now have to get back to 1970 to stop the master plan from its genesis, therefore ensuring this version of the future will never happen. By the time that this 8-part story of Timeslip, the Year of the Burn-Up, was broadcast, the series was becoming quite successful and even commanded a comic strip in the TV Times for Children magazine, Look In. One of the interesting things to note are the subtle little nuances that emphasise the world is burning up. I love the touches that in the early episodes of The Year of the Burn-Up, the end credits play over tropical, humid vegetation right at the start, but by the last episodes, the lush flora is replaced by burnt-up vines, verdant at the beginning, barren at the end. How prescient this is nowadays, to be honest, because, you know, it's making a point that we are learning now that if man tampers with nature, ergo, man will pay the price. By this stage in the show, things were now linking nicely. In dialogue, acknowledgement is made to previous episodes, and the cloned 1990s chicks Alpha 16 and 17, played by real-life twins Lisa and Teresa Scoble, are clones of Miss Stebbins, trainer secretary from 1970s Whitehall. Ian Fairbairn played clone Alpha 4 with a great menace. Remember him from the John Pertwee Doctor Who story Inferno? Mr. Fairbairn certainly does a great scary face. Look at his look he gives a captured Liz. I love this moment. It probably induced a few nightmares. Something so simple but mega effective. Timeslip likes to supply shudders with the visage, also witnessed with Devereaux's death, Jointer's death especially, and the close-up of Dummies and Day of the Clone, which was kind of spooky. Just a thing to gee up the kids and wreck their chance of a pleasurable snooze. Anyway, Alpha 4 crops up again in the Day of the Clone, the final story in the form of Pittman, who was Trainer's colleague from 1965, where we learn his cells were cultivated and engineered, growing into 1990s Alpha 4. Liz and Simon also now mature, proving all the shite they've had to deal with has strengthened their bond. It's revealed in this future Beth and 2957 were even partnered up to become married, causing disgust to Liz and Simon, but the most significant transition was that of Commander Trainer. Somewhat untrustworthy and dubious before, this tale is where Trainer becomes a pure out-and-out villain and of genuine perilous threat to Simon and Liz. Beth, played by Mary Preston, who in the icebox had cropped hair and a silver one-piece, now sports flowing long locks and a chamois Indian ensemble, almost cavewoman-like. Simon's future projection of 2957 echoed Simon's spectacle wearing. I love the simplicity again when both take them off at the denouement of the first episode.
But this is the best part of the joke. Do you know who that is, Simon? No. Well, I'm Liz and she's me, right? Right. And him out there, Simon, dear. It's you. Simon 1990 version. And he's not called Simon anymore. He hasn't even got a name. Just a number. 2957.
Something so simple but so poignant. And just like Trainer, he wears a stylish white suit. David Graham, who plays a character, was the voice of Lady Penelope's chauffeur, don't you know. Another change was the writing arrangement. Bruce Stewart had been in sole charge of Timeslip, but due to other commitments at the time, handed over the reins over to Victor Pemberton, known for his missing Doctor Who story Fury from the Deep, and a few Ace of Wands episodes, namely the relatively okay Sisters Deadly and the awesome Power of ATEP from Season 3. So Victor Pemberton at the helm takes the show in a fresh other direction and wraps it up very well indeed, much to Bruce Stewart's reported delight. In the final story, The Day of the Clone, this moved things back in time by a shorter period of 5 years in 1965. But back in 1970, when it opens, Simon looks for a trainer in Whitehall, but learns he is doing things hush-hush for the government in a secret establishment called R1, where Liz has been incarcerated after being kidnapped at the ending of the previous story, The Year of the Burn-Up. Simon infiltrates a place in a bid to rescue Liz, which highlights his change of heart. There, Simon and Liz together discover the secret of R1 and the experiments are for longevity and cloning. Escaping from 1965 with the help from one of the experimental longevity volunteers, Liz and Simon return to 1970 in order to right wrongs and prevent the horrifying results of perverting science, which would result in the dystopia as witnessed by them throughout the series. However, all is not what it seems, especially where Commander Traynor is concerned, resulting in a doppelganger showdown at the series climax. The very last story, Day of the Clone, provides a neat little ending to the 26-part series. Considering Victor Pemberton completed this in just 3 weeks, Clone is something of a triumph, tying loose knots and ensuring a satisfactory denouement. Overall, Timeslip is a enjoyable little romp, and there's elements of it that does echo ATV Sapphire and Steel and is equally as fascinating. Like most of the Kidult programmes for this period, the series was broadcast in a children's slot, but unlike now, was not watered down or became patronising. It's as though that this show is made by adults and created with an adult mindset that children might like, a formula I applaud. Make a programme for adults that children might like is the key to these sorts of programmes that were broadcast at the time. The performances here are superb, and special mention is needed for Quilly's interpretation as he plays 4 different variations of Commander Traynor throughout. The trainer at Oswald in 1970 carries an air of enigma, deepening as the programme progresses, and seems to be on a quest to find out about the future, bordering almost on the obsessive, until we eventually find out the truth and why he's that way. Traynor from the 1940 period seems a textbook boy's own sort of hero, but rather stoic, as well as displaying an affable nature, as well as notable intellect in good measure, especially in his scientific debates with the naval Nazi Gottfried. Traynor from the Burn-Up in 1990 is out-and-out treacherous and unhinged, but we learn who or what this incarnation is, and he is a broken man in more ways than one. But it's in the Day of the Clone story that the true and real Traynor is revealed, and he proves to be a man that's completely beyond repair, but like his 1940 self, wants to see some sort of justice done, even if this means by righting wrongs he jeopardizes his own life. Quilly is superb at a time when real true thespians acted due to a bloody good script rather than how much fame or fortune they can get or their agent could milk from them financially. With guest parts from popular and recognisable actors such as Sandor Elise, a cult TV favourite appearing in such groovy shows like The Avengers, Strange Report and The Professionals, as well as classic retro cinematic treats as films like And Soon the Darkness. If you've never seen that, watch it, that's brilliant. Don't bother with the remake. Evil of Frankenstein and of course Countess Dracula. In this series he seems right at home and has a very commanding performance. Actor turned spiritual healer John Olken also crops up. Now you'll know him from The Sweeney and of course Crown Court, and in the first story he plays Liz's younger incarnation of her father in the first story along with Sandor Elise. Iris Russell, another brilliant all-round actress known as Steed's boss father in the hit-and-miss Tara King season of The Avengers, plays Liz's telepathically equipped mother, providing this bridge between the now, the then, and the going to be. Mary Preston's acting abilities are also worth of note here, because her interpretation of the character of Beth, that appears not only in the time of the icebox but also the year of the burn-up, are very pivotal to the actual plot, and she contrasts very well with the Beth of the cold and the Beth of the warm, depending on which story you watch. And she chimes very well with the environment in where her character's set. And although these are supporting roles per se, they certainly hold it all together for sure. Ruth Boswell, as script editor of Timeslip, is, I guess, another prong of success in the production, and adds value. This talented woman produced other Kidult achievements, such as The Tomorrow People, that we looked at in Look Again's first season, the spooky anthology series Shadows, and Warrior Queen with Sean Lloyd ensures that Timeslip features a spot-on production from all concerned. The only letdown, I suppose, would be the budgetary constraints and the rather crass technology of the time. But here, unlike now, special effects take second place, and the decent acting and fantastic storytelling are always first and foremost. Originally, Timeslip was made as an all-colour production from ATV, but alas, due to a technician strike at ITV, a few episodes of the story Day of the Clone were filmed in black and white, which made the series difficult to export to the United States. And because this didn't happen, there was no other country that was broadcasting the series in its initial colour. It made it very, very difficult to export. There's two theories why the episodes in colour don't exist anymore and only black and white film does. We must be thankful, though, after hearing the shocking fate of some other shows at this time, that we have all 26 episodes to be enjoyed again. The first theory is that the colour episodes, bar one episode of Time of the Icebox, were simply wiped and possibly reused as a form of cheapskate junking. The other was that these tapes did exist up until the 1980s, before ATV lost their franchise and became Central Television, where the colour tapes were found to be damaged beyond all repair and therefore could not be broadcast, and being unusable and of no further use, they ended up on the scrap heap. Timeslip was repeated on TV only once in 1973-74 and never saw the light of day until VHS video in the early 1990s saw their release, and then finally on DVD. Until now, Timeslip was fondly remembered but scarcely seen, but in true look again style is now a favourite with many, many fans. All the stories are damn good yarns, but I must say I was a fan of the first story, The Wrong End of Time, and definitely champion The Year of the Burn-Up as my favourites compared to the others, although they are all very good. I enjoyed Burn-Up for a number of reasons. I suppose Dennis Quilley's exemplary performance, the solid dynamics between Liz and Simon that have finally reached a peak, and the sheer desperation of the characters facing an apocalypse, which, in my opinion, is considerably dark stuff for a family show. Something which scares me now even more so was the episode ending, or I think it actually went into the break, where the planets become larger, heralding the world's end because the environment is completely buggered up. I hate these claustrophobic little endings where there's naff all you can do in those situations. Very claustrophobic and quite desperate, but very well acted. And once again, I will add, it's such a shame that the show wasn't actually saved so we can see it in colour. It does really make that difference. I do know that there was, do you remember those little viewfinders you used to get where you used to look through and click the next scene and the next scene, almost like 3D? Well, I do know that Timeslip was one of those Viewmasters, so if anybody has a chance to find these, that would be a bit of a gem, because that would give you an idea of what the show originally looked like in all its polychromatic glory. We cannot possibly overlook also the music of Timeslip, with its crashing, melodramatic opening theme. It's called Le Right de Terre, or Earth Right, the right of Earth, call it what you will. And it's one of 4 rights composed by Edward Michael, who was a British composer. And these introduced and was used to herald the opening credits of the programme, the ending credits, as well as the ends of part 1 and beginning of part 2. And I can imagine most children at the time, once they heard that wonderful theme, dashing in from whatever they were doing, with going to the fridge, getting a bowl of Angel Delight, and sitting down to see what's happened to Liz and Simon next. Prescient, pertinent, and poignant in its own wonderful, nostalgic way, Timeslip is an amazing feat for television, and is a slice of retro science fiction drama worthy of appraisal on Look, Look and Look Again, that I really am privileged to have reappraised the show with you based on the recommendation of one of the subscribers to my channel. And also a big thank you to Edison 865, who colorized this 2 minutes of the first story, The Wrong End of Time, that only exists in black and white. That must have taken ages, and I've got to give credit where credit's due. It's brilliant to have a glimpse of how it could have been when it was originally broadcast. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this show, and I look forward to seeing you again. So until next time on Look, Look and Look Again, cheerio.
Cyanogen is one of only 3 companies in the world which has the technology to make new pets for people. We were allowed to see these cloned puppies with their surrogate mothers. The science is similar to that used to create Dolly the sheep back in 1996, but in these labs in the Chinese capital, they have developed and refined cloning to make it cheaper and more accessible.